living, for being in our own skin, and make it a lot easier. And then the 9 principles are based in things like honesty and kindness and courage and humility. And then the final chapter is about how we take all of that we have learned in the book and these practices out into the world so that we can be of service, so we can be the best versions of ourselves and elicit the most effective change. And through the whole process, it wasn't always in 3 parts, and it wasn't always 9, and they weren't called what they were called, and are they essential practices, or other, it took a lot of chopping and changing and figuring out what settled down the best for the read and the journey that the reader goes on.
Yeah, we knew that we wanted the reader to have the experience of a journey, and we knew that we wanted it to start with, how we all relate to ourselves, and that's why it starts with honesty, because no one wants to be a liar. No one sets out in their life, thinks, okay, I'm going to be as dishonest as I can, or not very many people, no one that I know, or who admits it. And yet there's one person that most of us lie to on a regular basis, and that's ourselves. We tell ourselves that we really do want to do something we don't want to do, or that we're okay with something that we're not, or that we're this kind of a person because it's much more convenient if we are that kind of a person. And we gradually lose touch, or we tell ourselves that things don't matter, that do matter to us, and we gradually, imperceptibly often shift away from who we really are. And then we experience a sense of self-alienation, and when we're hurting, it's much harder to go into the world and interact with others in a loving or kind way, because we just, we're in pain.
Completely. And you guys have been friends for a really, really long time. Has writing the book together evolved that friendship and your relationship with each other in any way?
Well, I think so. I mean, I can speak for myself that I'm finding out stuff about my good friend that I had never heard before. And I think anytime you're in a situation where you're forced into a heightened level of intimacy, it's going to throw up all different kinds of things. And actually, remarkably, we were just joking about it earlier on today, we're still talking now. But we have this running joke where, because I was the one who first brought the idea to Jennifer, and we have been on this course in London, the book tour there, and this book tour here, which is, back to back to back to back to back. And every time we get in the car to head somewhere that feels daunting, she says to me, "This is your fault." So.
But actually, what it has meant is that we've talked about this almost every time we see each other, so it'll be quite nice to go back to talking about other things.
Let's talk about kids and what you're doing on a Tuesday. One of the things that I personally really loved about the book is that from the offset, you're very clear about it's not trying to strive for perfection. It's very important that we're not trying to become a perfect version of ourselves through going through this process of self-improvement. And could you talk a little bit about the importance of that as a message?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we call for is for the P word to be banned, perfectionism, get rid of it, and normal along with it. Because we put ourselves under so much pressure, and we are bombarded all the time with images of what perfect looks like, and we can feel as if we're failing when we don't live up to these artificial ideas. And the goal is for each of us to be ourselves, whatever that looks like and however that is. And when we are, the way we interact with every aspect of our life just changes. So forget any outside idea of who you are, and try and let it come from the inside out, not the outside in. And allow yourself to do things badly. I'm a really big fan of that.
I also really liked that you kind of very outwardly call all of our inner cynicism out. Obviously, you've got great British cynicism and sarcasm at every step, but by calling it out, it makes it much easier to kind of confront it and get around it. And could you talk a little bit about that aspect as well?
Well, I guess, getting honest, period, what Jennifer was just saying. And one of the foundations that runs through all of the principles is a level of honesty that a lot of us are really not used to. And so whether that's being honest about the amount of time that we spend online, or the amount of time we spend on Facebook, or the amount of time we spend binge watching or eating things that we know that make us like shit. Any of those things that we end up doing, it's really, calling our, putting the truth of that on the table so that then we have a choice. So that then we can see it for what it is and say, actually, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good. I'm going to try removing those things for a day and see if that feels better and put my attention somewhere else that feels like it has a deeper sense of meaning and value and beauty.
And we are, all kind of trained to be cynics. We're trained to trust one form of knowing, which is scientific or mathematical. And we're trained out of trusting our instinct, out of trusting our intuition, and also out of that innate sense of fairness. Anyone who spends time with small kids knows that it's not fair is one of the most basic feelings that there is. And yet we get educated that it's okay for the world to be as grossly unfair as it is. And we all know inside that it isn't unfair, and yet that's, we're told that's naive or idealistic to talk in those terms, but really it isn't. It's just that it serves the current structures and the current way of doing things if we think that we can't talk in those terms, but we can and we should, and right now we must.
And speaking of the world being unfair, it feels like women are not just having to fight for our rights, but we're having to refight for rights that we thought we won 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. One of the things that I don't know about for many of you that I thought was so special and magical about the Women's March in January was that it brought this great sense of unity. And do you feel like, obviously, the political outcome isn't what we all wanted or many of us hoped for, but that there's an underlying positivity in the way it's making us all more engaged and active citizens?
Yeah, I think... I promise you can answer the next question.
Do one each.
Share. Be fair. Okay. So, well, Gillian marched in London and I marched in DC, and one of the things that I think we've all realised is that we can't leave it to our politicians to sort things out, and if we do leave it to our politicians, we are all screwed completely. So that is not an option anymore. So what we have to do is find ways of organising, find ways of connecting, and find ways of making a difference. And that march was the start. It wasn't a one-off act. Many of us have marched before, and marching isn't about getting an instantaneous result. It's about standing up and saying, this is what I believe, this is my truth, I'm here, I'm not going away. And one of the things that we talk about in this book, and a lot of women on the march were saying, what can I do? And we hope that one of the things women can do is take this book away and read it with other women, whether it's co-workers, other mums, people that you meet in a meet-up group, or a book group. Just start having the conversations that are in this book, because amazing things happen when two or more women are gathered together. And one of the qualities that we're all going to need, if we are all going to be activists, and I don't think there's any question but that we are all activists now, is resilience. One can burn out from trying to fight what feels like an implacable force as quickly as one can burn out from workaholism. And so it's how do we build resilience, and how do we, try and meet hate with love, with joy, and how do we embody the qualities that we're fighting for? It's no good, I believe in love and you're despicable. We have to be what we are, what we want to see. We have to engage in that way. And we also have to form connections with people with whom we profoundly disagree. It's not enough to sit on our moral high horses and say, well, we're right and they're wrong, and don't they understand and don't they know? That doesn't serve us. We're all very good at criticising those who would build walls, and yet we build walls ourselves, walls of righteous indignation, walls of judgment. And, we have to reach beyond that. There's a beautiful Rumi quote, which is beyond talk of good and evil, there's a field, and I will meet you there. And we all need to meet in that field right now. It's not enough to be right or wrong.
I also think think one of the things about the way everyone's banding together is it's allowing us that ability to reclaim the word feminist. It feels like a word that a lot of people didn't necessarily want to associate themselves with. There's been a lot of negative connotations over the year, and do you think that we're kind of rallying back together as feminists as part of this?
Well, I was one of those people. You know, I was one of those people who was a little bit afraid to refer to myself as a feminist. And it wasn't actually until I was in the middle of playing one of the greatest, now I believe, feminists of all time, Stella Gibson, when I said in an interview that I wasn't one, and a friend of mine emailed me and said, "You cannot say that." And I started to really look at what my fears were around it, and I think so much of my innate reactions that are essentially feminist reactions to things are things that I've never actually really defined in any way. They're just a part of who I am and my sense of what's right and wrong, and I've never actually associated any of that with that need for equality, and so my sense of the word and what it means to me has changed 360 degrees just over the last few years, and to a point where obviously I'm quite proud to refer to myself as a feminist now.
I also think that a lot of times we're kind of pitted against each other in society, men and women, absolutely everyone. It's all about self-gain and what, you know, the American dream is an individual thing. It's not about a group achieving something. And could you talk a little bit about the importance of kind of circumventing that?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why the book is called We is that it's an antidote to the me culture. You know, the me culture has not served us as a whole that well, you know, despite the incredible levels of wealth we have. Rates of inequality are at their highest level, and we know that that causes, you know, that the most happy societies are the most equal societies. They have lower the second house, when I've got the kids, then I'll be happy. But it's a vanish, you know, it's like trying to get to the horizon. Each time we get to what we think is the finishing line, there's something else that we need to get before we feel okay. So we're all collectively suffering from the disease of more. And so this is about stepping out of that paradigm and into another paradigm. You know, we know that the things that bring us lasting happiness are connection, human connection, not things. And yet we pursue our lives in this me-based culture. It's a pursuit of things rather than connection.
And I think also, you know, in the book, Jennifer, you talk a lot about how much of our identity is associated with our profession and what we do. You know, the first time you meet someone, one of the first things they say is, "What's your name? What do you do?" And you talk about when you weren't working at one point and how, you know, you initially felt this need to lie about and talk about what you'd previously been doing before you felt that comfort in saying, actually, I'm not doing anything right now and it's okay. And imagine for you, Gillian, you're very project-based. There's times where you're doing 7 things at once like today, and then there's times of downtime in between, and how you guys both deal with that identity of professional versus personal.
Well, I mean, I had a really long period where I couldn't work at all. I had a depression that lasted for over a decade, and work was impossible. You know, leaving more than my immediate vicinity was impossible. So I was stripped of all those things, and, you know, as you say, I'd had quite a big career beforehand. So to begin with, I'd go, well, I used to do this, and after a while I could hear myself going, I used to, and what I realised was, and what I discovered in that period was that I could be really, really happy without those things. But I also saw how nervous it made other people when people said, so what are you doing? What do you do outside the home? And I'd say, nothing. I'm really lucky. I don't go to work. I didn't say I'm really lucky because I have to claim benefits because I've been so ill that I can't work. I would just say I'm really lucky, and I felt lucky. I came to feel lucky during that time, but it was a journey away from this is what I do to this is who I am.
And I've had quite an odd relationship with my career for some time, and I actually prefer not to be in the spotlight and prefer not to talk about what I'm doing or what I do or what I'm doing next. So most of the time, actually, I try and pretend that that's where I feel more comfortable, is pretending, you know, and it's an awkward moment because often other people are more attached to the fact that I'm an actress, that I'm attached to the fact that I'm an actress, and so I'll try and skirt around the conversation or the, you know, and I don't know how much of that is just, a certain shyness, and how much of it is to do with, you know, doing some of the work in the book, that's in the book over the years, and coming to terms with what actually is important in my life and important to me.
And what's your kind of attachment to what professional success means to you now? Because obviously doing something like writing this book is something that you're very passionate about. It's a very personal project for you both. Obviously you want it to be a success, but how does that relationship work with your new approach?
I mean, it's true. I mean, I had, on the Friday before I started to do the press in the UK, I had a real panic. Like, I really didn't want to leave the house. I thought, what have I done? You know, I've been so honest. And the book is, you know, it's a distillation of religious principles and spiritual practices that have been around for centuries, and we are very much, you know, taking what's been out there for a long time and placing them into one place. We are not experts, and so, but there's this, you know, this, I don't know whether it's an unfounded fear or whatever. What, you know, what if people start thinking that I'm trying to say that I'm perfect, or that I know what I'm talking about, or what if I'm in a bad mood and somebody videotape, you know, it's all that kind of like what if negative thinking, and so on the one hand the jury's out, and on the other hand, it really feels that the essence of what this book and the we potential movement could be is so much bigger. The potential of it is so much bigger than my little life and fears and personal stories and anything. And so as long as I focus on the fact that it, you know, even if it's 10 women who get something from this book and it changes their life in some way or alters the way that has to be enough, and that it's really being of service, being a part of this, and that is the most important thing. And so I have to kind of let go and leave it to the gods as to how it comes, whether it comes back to bite me in the ass, so to speak.
I also, you know, when you're on the road and you're very busy doing a lot of promotion like this, you know, kind of relating it back to the book again, in the way that you talk about, you know, your period when you weren't working, you basically turned around and said, this is too much, this isn't okay anymore, and I'm stopping. And could you maybe speak a little more to the importance of like taking that time for yourself, and how we can really find it more acceptable to say, this isn't okay, this is too much, I'm overburdened, I need more support, I need more staff, whatever it is?
Well, the first thing is that we have to be honest with ourselves about whether something is or isn't okay, because often we're the last person to know that it's not okay, because someone says jump and we say how high, rather than actually I've got a broken leg right now, so jumping is going to really, really hurt. But it's having in place those little breaks in the day that just, they don't have to be very long, that are just about coming back to centre, so that we don't lose that sense of connection with who we are and what is and isn't okay. And the more we take care of ourselves and the more we know where we begin and end, it's amazing. Other people start to read our body language and they stop treading on our grass. It's like we've got this invisible keep off my grass sign. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember what your question was, but I hope that was vaguely relevant, apart from straying all over some lawn that no one had planted.
So there's a lawn over here, that's some flowers. I also think one of the things about that I really responded to was in terms of interpersonal relationships, and I think all of us have been guilty of a relationship or a friendship or a work colleague where it's kind of a toxic relationship, and you know it's not good for you, but you feel too bad to let them go, and how you kind of came to be okay with saying no to other people's needs to put yours first.
You're not asking for names. You're much better at this than I
am. That's really interesting. I'm trying to think of any current examples in my life. last couple decades. Can I think about that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, well, one of the things we talk about in the book is that, you know, there are certain things we can change. We can change, you know, our own actions and our own attitudes, but generally we can't change other people. And so often when we're in that toxic relationship, we're just hoping that the other person is going to do something different. We just keep hoping that they'll deliver, and maybe they delivered in the initial stages of the friendship, or maybe they just look like someone, or maybe it looks like they are able to be nice to someone else, so why can't they just be nice to us? And it's kind of like a faulty slot machine. We just keep piling it in, and then sooner or later, you know, as we start to take care of ourselves, we become more and more allergic to that kind of situation, and it's a gradual reprogramming. You know, once we know what does feel good, once we know what a healthy, loving, caring relationship is, then it's going to be much harder to engage in ones that aren't, you know. And so it's just putting our attention where the wholesome things in our life are and trying to grow those, and just gently trying to wean ourselves off those rather toxic but nevertheless compelling engagements that we all have.
Sometimes they're more interesting relationships. I was interested, I've been rewatching some of The Fall recently in kind of putting this together, and one of the things that really struck me was with the character of Stella in The Fall, that she's obviously very ambitious and incredibly professional, but at the same time you do see her creating opportunities for other people. You know, with PC Farrington, she actually gives her that opportunity, wants her to have her by her side, and I was wondering if you could speak a little to how we sometimes in society seem to view ambition and the ability to create opportunities for others two mutually exclusive things rather than something that can be hand in hand.
Wow, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, very often as women, we are fighting for, and this is a very different experience than I have in my own life as an actor, but I know that women in general are fighting for the one female job, or maybe they're going to expand and hire 2 females this year for their 60 men. But that's so we're so often pitted against each other and competing for our livelihood, that sometimes I think it can be hard to step outside of that and see the human beings behind the competition. But I mean, ultimately, our very nature as women is compassion and collaboration. And when we tap into that in ourselves, when we really tap into, through self-care or through self-compassion, when we tap into that and are kinder to ourselves, often it's much easier to then see where we can be kinder to other people, and see that this is, that there are other women out there that we can actually, rather than competing against, we can help them to get to the next level of where they are hoping to go.
And I think their kind of ambition can kind of take a number of guises. One of them is someone trying to fix how they feel on the inside by getting that role and, getting that job or getting that position or achieving that particular ambition is about trying to make good, an inner wound, and it doesn't work. It works for a minute, and then there's another ladder to climb or another mountain to climb, and then there's another ambition which is about just being fully yourself and living fully and giving the fullest expression that you can to do something that you love. And when you pursue that kind of ambition, pursue what it is that you want to do, but from a position of wonderment rather than desperate inner brokenness, one can have a different relationship, and then someone else's success doesn't necessarily crucify one in the way that it does if you're, pursuing that ambition because you need it for some, psychic wound.
You talk very strongly in one of the later chapters about joy and the importance of just remembering things that make you happy and doing things for yourself to indulge in that. What are some of the things that you both do in everyday life when things are pitting up against you a little bit, just to feel happiness again?
I talk quite openly about the fact that this is the hardest principle for me. I find it really, really hard. There was a period of time where I carried around a notebook in my purse, which I just suddenly realized has gone astray. but that I would make time to sit and to draw a room that I was in, or draw, I would maybe do it once a week or once every couple of weeks. And that was something I felt very proud of myself for doing, because I'd always wanted to be one of those people that did that. And but it started to become one of those things in my mind that that if I wasn't doing it, that it didn't mean that that I wasn't going to be joyful, or that I wasn't, And so, but the struggle that I have most of the time is about doing those things that I know are, that create space for me to be bright and sunny and happy. And I'm very good at creating space for the things that feel productive or feel like there is a means to an end in it. And so I can judge my state of sanity and well-being on how often I actually allow myself to do those little bits of that's a form for me of self-care.
And I discovered the necessity for joy when I had that depression, because I had a work-related breakdown. I was a single mother, and I just worked or mothered, and I thought anything, rather, as Gillian was saying, that didn't have a purpose or an end result was a waste of this, this time when I had these two urgent tasks to attend to, and then I burnt out, and I realised that, I had a little pilot light, and it had nearly gone out completely because I hadn't fed it with the things that all of us have that, that's a metaphor for what we all have, and unless we feed ourselves with some amount of joy, it gets darker and darker and darker inside us. So I try and find things of beauty every day, and that helps me feel alive.
I also wanted to broach on the topic of imposter syndrome, which seems to be, again, something that everyone experiences, but, I was reading just the other day that 70% of women experience this. It can lead to depression, and there's a lot of physical and mental retributions of that. And everyone from Sheryl Sandberg to Maya Angelou who've experienced it. Is this something that you guys have dealt with, where you get a job? I know as a freelancer, I get a job, I'm excited for 5 minutes, and then I go, I have no idea how to do anything. And freak out for the next few days thinking that people are going to realize. And I'm wondering if that's an experience that you've both gone through as well.
I experience that with every acting job I get. Every single job, for the first few days of work, I am convinced that I'm going to be fired, and that I don't know what I'm doing. And there's a stage in the process of post-production where you go in and you see little bits of the work that you've done, and you do voiceover to the vocal bits that they haven't been able to capture. It's called ADR. And so before something airs or is up on the screen, as an actor, you get to just see just the tiniest little bit of the work that you've done. And most of the time, even after I've gone through a whole shooting process, I walk in and I'm looking through my fingers at the work that I've done, assuming that I'm going to see that I failed. And so I've had to work really, really, really hard to not run out. I wanted to run out so many times. I wanted to just find the back door, and or wish that actually they would fire me because it's just too painful. But so much of that is, what keeps me showing up is, one, the knowledge that I haven't been caught out so far. I haven't been, somebody...
You haven't been fired yet.
I haven't been fired yet. I haven't been caught out so far with somebody saying, I thought you could do this, but you suck. Or whatever the acting version of that is. And so, and there were times in doing live theater where, really, really, really just wanted it to be over. I constantly, why did I do it? Why did I say yes? What am I doing? Who do I think I am? And so much, just really, really focusing on not paying attention to those at all. I've gotten to a point where, the first 2 words of that sentence comes out and I put a wall up, or I don't, and sometimes it's about affirmation, just reminding myself that I am enough and I do enough, and however this transpires today in this moment will be exactly as it needs to be, and it's out of my control. I know that I'm doing my best.
And I think and, we live in a world where men occupy, certainly when, we were both growing up, occupy most of the positions that certainly I wanted to occupy. I wanted to be a lawyer and a journalist, and in both professions, I was given the distinct message that they didn't need any more women. When I was applying for jobs as a lawyer, I would get offered a traineeship, and on one occasion the person rang me up and said, "We're delighted to offer you the traineeship, but we have a woman already, just so you know." So at the end of the traineeship, and this was a firm of 20 people, and similarly when I then switched to journalism, I was given lessons to lower my voice so that I would sound more like a man. I remember when Princess Diana died, I was the senior female correspondent, and they asked my male junior to cover the story on, how she died and what the role of the press was, and they asked me to do the piece on how the children were going to cope without their mother, which was not offensive. A news story, and was offensive, and and I stood up and said that's not happening. But those are the assumptions that certainly in both those spheres of work I dealt with on a daily basis. So when you talk about the imposter syndrome, it's not just do I think I'm good enough, it's do the people I'm working with actually want me there. Most of the meetings in journalism happened in pubs at a time when I needed to put my kids to bed. So it was a club. It was a club.
I think most of the meetings in England happen in pubs, most professions. We have time for just a couple of very quick audience questions. Very enthusiastic in the front.
I'm interested in the writing process. You were in the same place, or you emailed, or how did it go? And the narrative parts are written by you two, or you know who wrote what?
Sometimes we were in the same room, and sometimes we were in the same room in London. Sometimes we were in the same room in other countries. Sometimes we were separate in the same city and emailing each other. Sometimes we were separate in different countries entirely, and emailing stuff back and forth. And
the writing process is, I don't know if you're a writer, but it involves so many rewrites. So, it's not possible in the end to really tell whose words were which in the non-narrative parts. We both constantly, it's a constant polishing exercise.
But it seemed to work pretty well. We're still talking?
Turned out pretty great. Yes, right here, second row, black shirt.
Hi, Gillian, you're one of my favorite actresses, and I just wanted to know, if you weren't an actress, what would you be, and have you ever considered doing anything else?
I've considered doing lots of other things. I think if I wasn't an actress, I'd probably be an artist. More kind of mixed media installation pieces. And I have a list of things that I want to build at some point, and maybe when I give myself permission to make time, or maybe if I stop being offered work as an actress, I'll consider doing that.
So, in the title of your book, it claims to be a manifesto for all women, everywhere. And I was wondering what you took into consideration about women of color and women of the LGBT community and underprivileged women in general.
It's a really good question. We were very conscious as we were writing this that we were white women who'd had access to education, and we did worry about putting the word everywhere there for that very reason, apart from the fact that we is an acronym for women everywhere. So it was partly that, but it was also the fact that we are all connected. One of the lies that we're fed by the patriarchy, if you like, is that we're not all connected and that we can't make a difference. But the truth is that all of us can take individual actions every single day that will have an impact on the life of another woman somewhere else? You know, how many of us buy a coffee automatically that we don't even want, half drink it and then leave it or drink it just because we've bought it? You know, that amount of money is enough if given to someone else, somewhere else on the globe, to do something. So we all have choices, we all have actions, and we're all connected. So yeah, you're right, we can't speak on behalf of anyone other than ourselves, but we can talk about the things that we can all do.
And overall with the book, you know, it's not just about taking it, reading it, living in the moment, it's about revisiting it, and you're very strongly encouraging people to find a voice of activism for themselves, also to create communities, whether it's online or just being in a room, and how we treat people as an ally and a potential friend on the street when we're buying that cup of tea that we're going to drink all of. And I was just wondering what you're hoping some of the key takeaways are that we all leave this book with.
I think that we can make a difference, that each one of us can touch someone else and can do something that will have meaning and make a difference. You know, so many of us are searching in our lives to be happy, but happiness isn't something that exists in isolation. You know, happiness comes with a sense of connection, a sense of purpose, and a sense of meaning. And, you know, anyone who is feeling lost either in their own life or feels frightened for what is happening on the planet, there is something you can do.
Yeah, I was going to say that we're not powerless. We're not powerless in our own lives, and we're not powerless to make a difference in the world around us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for writing such an incredible book. You know, as I admitted, I kind of go into a lot of these types of things very, very cynical, and I've been using some of the practices. I've tried meditating, might have accidentally fallen asleep a couple times, but have genuinely found it very wonderful and used it to make a couple of key life decisions. And so I strongly encourage anyone who didn't already pick up the book to grab it from the Strand. There's signed copies from Gillian and Jennifer. Please donate to UN Women He for She. We also, in addition to this special one-off talks event, we have an entire festival with about 50 talks coming up, April 19th through the 30th, which we're announcing next week, which includes Barbara Streisand for storytellers, Alejandro Inarritu for our director's series. So we've got some great programming coming up in just a few weeks, and we hope that you'll come and join us in this very same room. Thank you.